Hi Year 6, this is chapter 15 of Orphans of the Tide. The chapter is called A Visit from Hargraff. It took them an hour to get back to Orphanage Street, winding through the underground tunnels. Seth read Hester Meyer's diary by the dim lamplight, but Ellie strained to see the dial of her compass. He seemed to have much better eyesight than she did. "Why do you have his diary?" Seth asked. "What?" said Ellie distractedly. "Oh, that's not the original. After Hester Meyer died, some of his colleagues at the university had a handful of copies printed. When the Inquisitors found out, they confiscated almost all of them, because they thought they were the work of the enemy itself. They must have missed my mum's copy, though. I found it a few years ago, in among all the books she left too." "Have you read it?" "Of course," said Ellie, swallowing. "Many times." At last they came to a mouldy staircase leading up to a rusty iron door that opened into the basement of Ellie's workshop. The floorboards were rattling. Someone was banging furiously at the door. "That must be Anna," Ellie said eagerly. She motioned for Seth to hang back in case it wasn't, or in case there was someone else with her. She hurried to the door, pulled it aside, and Anna burst in, red-faced and breathless. "Ellie, you're okay!" she said, hugging her tightly. Like Ellie's clothes, hers was still damp, and she had taken off her shoes and socks. Her nose wrinkled. "Oh, you smell terrible!" "We've been in the sewers," said Ellie, as Seth crept from his hiding place. "You!" Anna cried, marching towards Seth. He watched warily as she stalked towards him, and then looked all the more surprised when she hugged him. "You saved us, you freak!" she cried happily. "Ugh! You smell terrible too! So what happened?" "You—" Her smile wavered. "You ran off!" "I went to rescue Seth," said Ellie. "He'd got himself cornered by an Inquisitor." "Oh," said Anna, chewing her lip. "I could have helped." Ellie shook her head. "It was too dangerous," she said. "Oh, okay," said Anna glumly. "So, how did that fire start?" "I've no idea," Ellie lied. Anna scratched her head. "But you were yelling something at me back at the oystery about not being safe. You knew something was about to happen." Ellie stared at Anna a moment too long. "I didn't. Anna let out a big sigh. "Why don't you tell me?" Ellie was unnerved by the gentleness in Anna's voice. It was like she was trying very hard not to shout or cry. Her cheeks had gone pink. "You always keep secrets from me," she said. "What secrets?" Ellie felt her temper rise. There were more important things at stake here. Why was Anna being so difficult? "Look, I can't let you get hurt." Anna touched Ellie's sleeve. "You don't have to protect me." "Yes, I do," said Ellie, yanking her sleeve away. "You nearly got caught in the fire." "We both nearly got caught in that fire, and you didn't rescue me from it. He rescued us," Anna said, pointing at Seth. "I want to help." "No, Anna," Ellie said firmly. "It's my job to protect you." Anna sighed. "It's not really." She dropped her voice. "I'm not your brother." Something hot flared in Ellie's chest. "Get out!" she snapped, her whole body trembling. Anna took a step back. "I don't want your help. Get out!" Anna's brow crumpled to a hurt little frown. Her mouth opened and closed. But, I... She looked at Ellie and then seemed to decide something. Her eyes bulged, her lip curled. "Fine," she said. "Fine." And she marched from the workshop, rubbing a hand across her face. Ellie locked the door behind her, then slumped over the nearest workbench, her forehead thudding against the wood. "Ellie," Seth said sternly. "I don't want to talk about it," Ellie groaned. Her whole body was exhausted, and her mind was too. It was like someone had drilled a hole in her head and let all the energy drain out of her. She flopped on the ground. "Finn started that fire, didn't he?" said Seth. "I said not now, all right?" The front door rattled. It was an unfamiliar knock. The hair on Ellie's neck stood on end. Seth clambered up at a bookcase and hid in the library, and Ellie crept to the front door. "Lancaster," came a low voice. Ellie's stomach twisted. "Hargraff." She stayed utterly still, praying he would go away. "Let's not play games, Ellie. I've got an axe. Don't make me use it." Ellie rolled her eyes at this obvious bluff. Who carried an axe around? There was a deafening crash and a sharp edge of metal broke through the door, spraying splinters. All right, said Ellie, unlocking the door and pulling it aside. Hargraff towered above her, his black hair neatly parted. He regarded her blankly with his deep, dead eyes. "You're soaking wet," he said, stepping inside. He set down the axe and picked up a microscope from the workbench. He turned it around in his hand. "What's this for?" "It's like a very powerful magnifying glass," Ellie said resentfully. "It lets you see even the tiny animals that live in seawater." Hargraff grunted, then tossed the microscope back on the bench, where it rocked on its side and fell over. "What do you want?" said Ellie. Hargraff picked up one of Ellie's wheeled, exploding distraction devices, weighing it in his hand, and then put it back again. "I met your mother once," he said casually. "Nice woman. Clever, obviously. Very clever. So did you make that magnifying thing?" Ellie bristled. "No, she did." Hargraff nodded, idly inspecting the floorboards. Of course. His eyes drifted lazily up to her. "Why do you smell of sewers?" "I was fixing a drainage machine down near St. Epistane's sphere. I got messy." Hargraff rubbed his chin and gestured towards the basement. "You returned through that door?" Ellie stiffened. "What?" He pointed at the floor. "Wet footprints," he said. "Also, there seem to be two sets." He looked up inquiringly. I was with Anna, my best friend." Hargraff looked at Ellie for many long moments. She tried to hold his gaze, but her whole body was trembling. "Where is he, Ellie?" he said. "Where is who?" Hargraff opened the door to the basement and looked down into the darkness. Ellie prayed that Seth had remembered to hide the mattress he slept on. Hargraff closed the door, then stared at her, letting the silence fill the workshop until it was suffocating. "You realise, whether you protect him or not, he will die. Either by the end of the hand of the Inquisition, or the thing that lives inside him. By helping him, you only doom yourself as well." Ellie's cheeks were hot and surely red. She swallowed. Hargraff knelt down, his dead face inches from hers. "I warned you before," he whispered. "You don't know what you're dealing with. I was like you once. Young, bold, foolish. I thought I was the hero from some bedtime story. I raced to the top of the clockwork of St. Angelo's, eager to confront the evil beast. But instead, I found Claude Hestermeyer. He looked tired. So pathetic. And then..." Hargraff snapped his fingers. "He fell apart. Just like that. His skin, his flesh, his body was discarded. Like rags in the wind. And underneath, this thing. This creature. It lives inside the boy as we speak, growing stronger, waiting to emerge. And when it does, it will bring destruction that you cannot imagine." For a long moment, Hargraff seemed to forget where he was. His hand trembled and his eyes flickered in his skull, as if seeing memories play out in front of him at a rapid pace. He growled and closed his eyes tightly. When he opened them again, they were ringed red. With a creak of leather, he turned to show her the empty left arm of his coat. "I know, Ellie. You don't want to be there when the time comes, so tell me," he said, Where is he? I told you, she said. I don't know. Hargraff studied her. You hold some influence over him, don't you? I saw that much on the roof of St. Bartholomew's Chapel. You could see that influence for the good. You could use that influence to the good of the city. You could convince him to turn himself in. I haven't seen him since the day he was arrested, Ellie said. Is that so? Then perhaps you can explain why a girl, matching your description, was spotted fleeing the oystery earlier. And perhaps you can also explain why I found this just now, so close to where the vessel was last seen. From his pocket he pulled a small wheeled device with a key sticking from its back, placing it next to its exact replica on the workbench. Ellie's whole body shuddered. Why didn't it explode? You will bring the vessel to me, said Hargraff, or lead me to him, by noon 3 days from now. In return, I won't mention your name to the High Inquisitor. You will walk free. I will hand the boy over, or kill him myself if necessary. And then, he took a deep breath, looking longingly into the distance. They will sing the name of Killian Hargraff, defender of the city, destroyer of the enemy. They will call me a hero. They already call you a hero, said Ellie bitterly, but Hargraff was lost in thought. Finally, he looked at her. If you do not give him to me, I will inform the High Inquisitor that I found this toy at the scene of the vessel's escape. I will have you arrested. I will have your workshop torn apart. I will have make your life an unbearable hell until you can tell me what you know. And when the dust settles, you will be dead. And your mother's legacy. He picked up the microscope from the workbench. Will fall to nothing. He dropped the microscope to the floor and stepped on it with a huge black boot, crunching through the metal and the glass. Good day, Miss Lancaster, he said, and then he bowed and marched from the workshop. Ellie stared dully at the broken bits of microscope. It was supposed to explode, she said in a hollow voice. Why didn't it explode? Ellie, are you all right? Said Seth, leaping from the library. I'm fine, she said. Her voice sounded like someone else's, and her body felt very cold. Are you sure? Ellie hobbled towards the nearest workbench, her legs like lead. She lay her head down, resting on one cheek. Yeah, I'm okay. She glanced up at Seth, who was looking down at her sceptically. No, she said quietly. Seth bit his lip. We'll figure something out, he said. We'll go back to my first plan. Find the real vessel. Maybe Finn can... He paused for a moment and was frozen still. Ellie straightened up, watching him nervously. Seth, what's wrong? He looked at her. Finn, he said. Ellie swallowed. What about him? Why is Finn going to such lengths to protect you? Why do you matter so much to him? It's complicated. Seth picked up Hester Meyer's diary. But the things he's done, saving me from the bonfire, starting that other fire at the oystery, they're impossible. He stroked the cover. It's just like in here. Hester Meyer makes a wish and impossible things happen. A horrible icy pain gripped Ellie's chest. She slumped to the floor. Seth knelt down next to her. Ellie was sure she was about to be sick. You keep saying I'm not the vessel, but you've never explained how you know that, Seth said quietly. The only way you could be so sure is if you do know who is. Ellie, is Finn the vessel? Ellie closed her eyes, not wanting to see the look on his face when she told him. She took his hands in hers and hoped he would not let go once she said the words. No, Seth. Finn is the enemy. I'm the vessel. And that's the end of our chapter. Bit of a dramatic ending there. So we finally know who the vessel is. All right, we'll be back after half term with our next chapter.